at 6:30, sorry, 5:34. And I just had the agenda right here. What do I do with it? Apologies. Oh, shoot, it didn't print. Oh, well, I can work off my phone. Hang on. Give me 1 second. Okay, so we call the meeting to order. And let's let's do the roll call first. You want to kick us off? Anyone?
Lynn here.
Tracy here.
Ken here. And stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My favorite part. She always puts up the flag for me. Thank you, Madison. Okay, so then we have the minutes, which were included in the packet from last meeting. And are there any comments or edits to the minutes? So everybody had a chance to take a look at them. If you have and they look good to you, we'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Unless there's any comments.
Actually a comment because the
Please.
secretary just for my HOA, and I find it very difficult to capture minutes appropriately, and I think that Madison does a great job of that and keeping them succinct. So thank you.
These were amazing.
Oh, thank you.
The only thing I didn't notice mentioned.
Bravo.
Elimination of. The only thing, and maybe it's in here and I just missed it, was, I guess not, because it's the way the ordinance is written, it's not in there either. So I guess we're okay. What to do with the parking?
Moment, or yeah, it wasn't in the ordinance.
Okay.
I do need a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda for the Historic Preservation Commission meeting of December 17th, 2024.
We have a second?
I'll second that.
I'll second it. Okay, Tracy seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item, do we have any conflicts related to?
I apologize, Ken. I had asked for a motion to approve the agenda, so I need a motion to approve.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that. I apologize.
No
Working off of my phone here. Let's go back and look for a motion to approve the agenda. We've approved the minutes. Is that correct?
No, we've approved the agenda. Now I need to approve.
Okay, we need to approve the minutes. Okay. Boy, I'm really batting 1,000 tonight. Okay.
It's okay, Ken.
Okay.
We still love you. Put that in the minutes.
Thanks, Tracy. Thank you. All right, so now we're looking at the minutes. We did have a couple of comments there, but are we good now? And is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes in November 19th, 2024 of the Historic Preservation Commission meeting as is.
I'll second that motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we're talking about the October 15th, right? Those minutes.
Nope.
No.
November.
November 19th.
Okay, sorry, November 19th. Okay, and we got a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we're on number 5, declaration of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest for any matters coming before the commission tonight?
I will be recusing myself when it comes to vote on the ordinance, as I will be voting for it at Planning and Zoning.
Okay, great. Duly noted. Thank you. Any others? Okay, then we move on to public comments. Is there anybody on Zoom or in the audience there, Madison? Now is the time we would invite them to make any comments on any item not on the regular agenda.
There's no one online or in Zoom or in the audience.
Okay, then we'll move on to special presentations, of which there are none. Is that correct?
No, we have actually Ron Sladek with Tatanka Historical Associates here today. He is the consultant for our
Oh, excuse me. I
survey.
apologize. I didn't know where you were coming. I didn't know if he's coming in on the. Well, welcome.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Oh my.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Good
I've
evening,
really
Ron.
just.
Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, Ron. I'm Ken Halliday. I didn't get to meet you last. Nice of you to be here with us tonight.
Thank you for letting me join the call on Zoom. I was hoping to be there in person today, but unfortunately, in coordinating with Madison, our schedules kind of slipped away from us, and we ended up with a lack of ability to actually meet up and spend the day together, which I was planning to do initially. So we've rescheduled my in-person kickoff there, basically, for a few weeks from now. I'll be in town on January 13th and 14th, Monday and Tuesday. That might even bleed into a little bit of Sunday or Wednesday that week. But it's important for me to be spending time with Madison on that first visit, so that we can tour the town and I can get her perspective and your perspective on the historic resources that are there. I've been through Minturn many times. I've stopped there as well to do a little shopping and that sort of thing, but this is a different perspective now that I need to gain on the historic resources in the town. So I was asked by Madison if I could basically do a little presentation of the project. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but I want to just run through the methodologies. Does that sound okay?
Please
Yeah.
and thank you.
Yeah, so I'll talk for just a few minutes. I'll be succinct, but I want to talk about what the project is going to involve from here forward. And then, of course, to answer any questions you might have about this. As I'm sure you probably saw when I submitted my proposal a couple months ago, I've done a lot of work in the general area over many years. I've done a lot of survey work in Avon, for example, just around the corner from you. As well as in Glenwood Springs. I've done 2 big surveys in the downtown area over the years. Done a lot of work in Carbondale and Aspen, and other places throughout the area where I've done both survey projects and a lot of landmark nominations. So I am familiar with the Eagle River Valley, with the general area, with Eagle County. Not only with historic resources, but also with the archival materials that are available, where those can be found and what's available as well. So this is not a new part of the state that I'd be working in. I've been there many times over many, many years. So this project specifically is going to involve 2 primary phases of work. The first of which is what might be called a reconnaissance survey or a windshield survey. And the second phase being an intensive level survey of 10 properties. The windshield or reconnaissance survey, which is what I want to start with Madison on when I'm there in just a few weeks, is going to involve basically walking the Old Town area and taking a look at what still survives in the way of historic buildings and related resources, because that can also involve structures and historic landscape features and that sort of thing. From the 1880s when the town started up through your period about 75 years ago, I understand that you guys work with the 75-year threshold for historic resources in Minturn. Of course, the National Register, which is part of what I also need to evaluate during this project, is eligibility for the National Register, uses by and large a 50-year threshold, and then the state Register of Historic Places utilizes a 30-year threshold. So I want to make sure and take a look at all the potential resources there that we're going to be considering in terms of intensive level documentation, but also those that are or might merit consideration for landmark status on those 3 different levels, local, state, and national register. And that's all going to make its way into the written materials that you'll end up with as a result of this project. So the reconnaissance survey is going to involve that broader look at the built environment there in Minturn. with the goal of working with you, staff and commission members, to weed those down to 10 properties that you want to see recorded more in depth on a more intensive level. And then that will lead into that second phase of work, which is the actual intensive level survey. That's going to involve a lot of research, fieldwork, research, and writing. All of this will. The reconnaissance, as well as all of the results of the intensive level survey, are going to be presented in the form of a project report that you'll have at the end of the project. I'll be submitting a draft copy of that for your review, and then get your comments, and then go into the final draft. But I'll also be producing the 10 intensive level survey forms for those properties that you want highlighted. Those forms, have you worked with those forms before?
We have not.
Okay, so there's a standard format for those, which is produced by by History Colorado, which is called a Form 1403. That's for intensive level documentation of historic properties. And each one of those forms includes some great detail about the property. So what will be documented on those forms, each one of them, one for each property, is information about site identification and location, a detailed description of the architecture that's there today, including not only what is historic, but also what alterations appear to have taken place or are known to have taken place on each building, a history of the construction and development of the property, and then an in-depth historical narrative. So the narrative, in a place like Minturn, is going to require title searches. So I'm going to be going into the county courthouse to the clerk and recorder's office and producing a title search on each property that will result in what I call a chain of ownership. That chain of ownership will take the property from the present time all the way back to when it was first developed. And once I have that chain of ownership in hand, then it gives me a whole bunch of names to start working with. Who did the property transfer from and to every time it was transferred? And then I can start digging into biographical material about the ownership of each property and who these people were. There you get into some really interesting storytelling. And, you know, I always say that if you can't tell a good story about a historic property, who's going to want to save it in any way?
Yeah.
You know, the owner themselves may not want to save it. And why should anybody else among the public care about it? So to me, as a historian, I've always viewed my career, and I've been in the field for over 30 years, largely as a storyteller of sorts, but based in fact, based in what we can find out from the historic record and from the field recording of each property. And then you have to come up with something of a story, a factual story that gets people interested in the property. Sometimes there's just a rather bland story there, but often there's something more interesting behind the people and the events and the way they plug into the overall development of Minturn and its history. And that's my goal, is to find that. So again, just wrapping that back around to the very end of the project, all of this is going to be in your hands in draft form, the project report, as well as the 10 survey forms. You'll have a chance to look them over, give them some thought, discuss them, and then get back to me with comments. And then I'll go into the final draft work. So I was trying to think if there's anything else, but that's really, in a nutshell, the methodology that's used on every project of this type, no matter whether it's in Minturn or in Boston, you know, a neighborhood in a big city somewhere. It's just a matter of the scale and what types of resources you have to locate in terms of the archives. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or engage in any discussion with you about the project. And I am excited to get it going and to get up there and get my feet on the ground and get working on this. So what can I answer for you, or what would you like to discuss?
Thank you, Ron. Well, why don't we open it up for any questions? Tracy, Lynn?
Hi, Ron. Thank you. That sounds really interesting, and I'm actually quite jealous. I think I would love that job, but you
It,
got
it,
it first.
it is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. You know,
And you do have,
the hours of sitting in front of the computer writing are not always so great, but yeah.
I'm curious as to when your role typically ends. Like, do you typically, and when you've done this in the past, once you finish, do you kind of leave, or do you make recommendations as well as to what you feel is, like, you know, maybe a priority list of what should be preserved, or what is your, like, typically when you've done this in the past? And I know it's probably always different depending on the municipality, but where do you see your end of your project typically?
Sure. Well, there are a couple answers to that. One of which is that the project is funded by a grant combined with funds from the town of Minturn. And so we do have a grant deadline. So in practical terms, the end of the project comes with that grant deadline. But in terms of the work itself, I will make recommendations in the project report as to how the town might want to proceed with its preservation efforts as it relates to survey and landmarking. One of the other things that I forgot to mention when I was speaking before is that I'm also going to take a look at where it might be reasonable to create a historic district there. In terms of potential boundaries for a district during the course of the reconnaissance. It doesn't, and what I'm going to be telling you in those recommendations doesn't mean they're set in stone and that you have to do such and such, but it will provide you with the tools to move forward with further work in town, whether it be further survey work or the establishment of a district if there is interest, and just efforts to try and preserve what is important to the community. That work, those kind of recommendations often fall within a preservation plan. I've written many preservation plans for communities over the years. In fact, I just last night got final approval for one for Crested Butte from the town council. They just signed off on that one. But I know you already have a preservation plan in place. I've read through it. I know it was done recently, so you don't need another one of those. But what I'll do is take the work of the preservation plan now to another in-depth level, so that you're going to start seeing some real serious work being done on intensive level surveys, at least this first 10, and recommendations for how to proceed with survey work and a potential historic district if there's interest in establishing one. Beyond the project, it's actually, I should say, it's quite common that I end up getting called back into a community to do some follow-up work. It might not happen immediately, and it doesn't have to happen in Minturn or anywhere. But a good example is I did a survey in Glenwood Springs of their downtown district in 1998, and they called me back 20 years later to do another survey of the downtown district. Each one, I think, involved 40 properties. Sometimes there's a big gap of time. As long as I'm still alive and kicking, I'm happy to come back. Sometimes a survey project like this or a preservation plan flows right into the community's next priorities. I'm not guaranteed any future work, of course. I have to compete just like anybody else would for a contract. But one of the other things that can happen, which has happened fairly often, is that I end up helping folks with landmark nominations. If there are properties that are of interest and the owners are interested in getting their buildings or properties landmarked. So it can flow into other areas of progress and work and all that, but this will definitely give you food for thought and tools to work with for the future.
Great, thank you.
Ron, do you have investigating these buildings or spaces or whatever it is and getting the stories told, do you ever need to speak to people who have been here a long time who might know some of those answers?
Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
have some people in town that have been here. Well, I know one lady, 75 years, and she is still and I know she would be willing to come in and talk to us. She won't give a speech. She won't come to a large room full of people, but on a one-to-one, she will talk to people. And if that becomes an issue, I know a few others also.
Yeah, so I as a historian, I do spend a lot of my time interviewing older folks and getting their thoughts, their memories captured, their advice when it comes to historic resources. So yes, I see those people as critical to a project like this. So if you can direct me to those folks over the coming months, I would love to meet with them in person, talk with them, and find out, what sage advice they can also give us on the subject at hand.
The specific one I'm thinking of has already agreed to talk to us, but that could be you.
Sure.
Been here 75 years and is in the Valley 98 years.
Wow. Wow.
'Cause
Well, I'm
she was
happy to meet
involved-
with people anywhere. I've gone to nursing homes.
And very, very, very alert.
Yeah, that's
Very
great.
alert.
I've literally met people in town, town halls, but I've also met with them in their homes. I've met with them in nursing homes, assisted living facilities, wherever it's comfortable for them, to just sit down and have a conversation and find out what they can tell us about these historic resources, whether it's a specific property we're asking about, or if they have some general thoughts on what's important in the community.
Well, I will clarify a few things with her because I'll be seeing her at Christmas. And
That would be great.
make sure she would consider it.
Sure. Thank you. And if,
Other than
and
that,
if
how long
she's,
have-
if she's,
how
Hey, Ron,
long-
I had a question. Oh, go ahead, Lynn.
I
Go
was
ahead.
just going to ask how long you've been doing this, if I missed that.
how long I've been doing this?
Yeah.
I've been in the field since 1988,
Oh, good.
working
Wow.
with my own consulting practice since 91.
I'm like Tracy.
You're
I am-
almost historic.
Yeah, I think I've passed that mark. Although not in Minturn, you got to be over 75 there, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
There's still time.
But according to the state, you are.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, Lynn, did you have another question
No,
before
go
I
ahead.
ask?
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we can keep asking, but I wanted to ask a question about this 10 properties. Do you come to us with that list and based on your surveys, your windshield survey, your reconnaissance and all that, you come back to us and say, hey, this is my top 10 list of historic properties in Minturn
That's a great
that
question.
you should investigate further,
Typically,
Is that
it's
how I understand?
yeah, it's typically a combination.
Okay.
My primary goal when I go into a community is to be listening and observing. In other
Right.
words, I want to hear from you guys what you think the most important needs are in terms of, which properties should we be getting to first? Are there properties that are threatened with redevelopment? In some places, there's gentrification going on, when you get into
Right.
like neighborhoods in Denver. Are there threats because of a roadway project or a town project? Sometimes the towns themselves are planning on, I'm working with Colorado Springs right now, and they're planning to redevelop all of North Nevada Avenue, going north out of Colorado Springs, which is lined by historic motels. And so they're looking at that, their Preservation Commission, as a top priority for survey. So I need to be listening to what you guys want and what you're seeing the priorities, where you're seeing the priorities. That can also, though, I do like to bring my own perspective in to make recommendations, because sometimes I'll see a place that architecturally or because of its historic use early on or whatever, I think really would merit an intensive level documentation. but the community might not even be thinking about it that way yet.
Right, right. That's what I was wondering.
You
Yeah.
know, lately that's often involved mid-century modern buildings, you know, buildings that were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, that folks just aren't looking at that way yet as
Mhm.
historic. But sometimes, you know, an older building can slip by us. For example, a carriage house, you know, in an alleyway,
Mhm.
that turns out to be the only one that's left in town. And people weren't thinking about it because they didn't realize maybe that it was a carriage house, or they weren't thinking about alleyway buildings, or, you know, the secondary buildings on properties that can become quite rare over time because they get torn down. Um, just as examples, you know. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's going to
But
be a combination.
but I'm hearing you say that you'll listen, you'll learn from the community,
Yes,
you'll get that feedback, and that's going to mostly inform your list of 10.
yes,
But you'll also sprinkle in some of your own opinions and might surprise us with something that you come up with.
it's
But you will
possible.
come up with, that's how you come up with that list of 10. And then you go deep. And then at the end of the day, my second question is what do towns typically do with that? Like, what would you envision us doing with that list? So we've got this list of 10, and we're all unanimous, including your one that we didn't know was on the list that you added, are really special properties, and so we need to protect them. So do we nominate? I'm just trying to, I'm not asking like that we're going to make a decision on what we're going to do today. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
explore with you, where does this go? Back to kind of where Tracy was going, where does this lead us to? And what do towns usually do with that information? Do they act on it? Do they sit on it? Do they wait for the town to nominate? Do they wait, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, you know, it's the whole range of what you just said.
Yeah.
Too often, these types of projects, even preservation plans, get completed and then the town doesn't even do anything with it. That's happened a
Yeah.
lot over the years. It gets shelved and then it sits there, you know, like a lot of planning work does. My intention is always to develop plans or studies that are usable tools, but I can't force a community to make use of it. You know,
Yeah.
it's up to then town council and the Historic Preservation Commission and your staff to actually turn it into something that is a living bunch of material. So to answer your question, there are two things I would recommend that you do with these materials and that are typically actually done with them. One of which is to disseminate all those site forms to the property owners. You know, once these site forms are done, these intensive level survey forms, they should be handed to each property owner of the 10 properties. And then a discussion needs to be opened up about whether they might be interested in getting them landmarked. Once people see what has been found about their property in terms of the architecture and history, many people get excited about it. Not everybody. There are people who just don't care about this kind of stuff, or they have other plans for the building. You know, they're planning to sell, or they're
Mhm.
planning to tear it down, or engage in a major remodel. But a lot of people love seeing this information. So it opens up a door for a discussion with the property owner about potential landmark status
I
for their
love that.
property. The other thing that I think is really useful with these materials is to disseminate them to the public. Get the word out to the public that this project is starting up, that it is underway, that it is, you know, when it's completed, that it's been done, and here are the results. And look what we found out about these 10 properties or about the Old Town area as a whole. So there's an educational opportunity here for the general public that will help promote your mission as a preservation commission.
Well, I think one of the things that I'll just share with you, just my own personal, I think this is really, really important what we're talking about, because the context that you'll be coming into is that there's a lot of folks in town that are afraid of historic preservation,
Mhm.
and we have this nomination. You've looked at our rules, right? So
Yeah.
you post if you want to do some alteration or demo, you have to post for a period of time, and people can nominate. And so it scares people, and so I think
Mhm.
to your point, sharing with the town that we're doing something that's disciplined and something that's based on fact, and we have this underway, and then sharing the results of that would I think help dispel and address some of that angst that people have. Now it'll raise maybe some angst with the guy that or gal that owns a building that doesn't want it to be historic and it's on the top 10 list.
Hmm.
There might be that kind of angst, but generally beyond the ones that we start to really talk about and focus on, there'll be a relaxation, I think, through the rest of the town, which I think could be really healthy.
I agree.
Because I think
Yeah.
everybody's kind of wondering. And so I don't know, maybe you're already aware of that context, but that's what we have in Minturn right now. By the way, other commission members, please speak up if you think I mischaracterized that. But I think that that's what you'll be coming into, and it'll be really helpful, I think, for us to hear your thoughts on the back end of this. The idea of sharing it, the idea of communicating the project along the way, I think are excellent ideas. And anything you can do proactive to help us with this context we're dealing with would be appreciated.
Yeah, what you're describing is exactly the scenario that I encounter in almost every town I work in.
Okay, well,
So
good. That makes me feel better at
yeah, so
least.
don't feel that Minturn is alone in that. This is
Okay, well, that's
it's just a
comforting,
matter of
actually.
in some places it's just more contentious, and others it's a little more relaxed. And a lot of that depends upon the education that's been put out there, the information, trying to allay people's fears, um, uh, trying to reassure them that has something to do, it has a lot to do with quality of life in the community, that it has to do with keeping Minturn a place that people want to live in, and that has its own unique character. You don't want Minturn to be just like anywhere else in Colorado, right? It has its own unique
Yep.
history and its unique character to it. And the only way to preserve that is by preserving the built environment in a way that is reasonable. And that requires identifying which properties are worth fighting for or trying to keep standing, and which ones you can allow to be a little more relaxed and see more change take place. So it's a balancing act, but it all requires a lot of public education.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
I'd love to be the fly on the wall as you go through this so I can learn.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah, we
too.
look
I
forward to
want to
learning. I
follow
think
you to
we,
the courthouse and watch how you dig deep through the public records.
But it's not very exciting.
Yes, probably a bit
It's just a
tedious.
lot of very careful trying to find needles in a haystack in the records.
I think Tracy's saying that's her idea of a good time.
Well,
That is exciting to some people, and
some of us are goofy like that. I consider myself that way for sure. That's why I got into this field.
yeah.
I do actually have a comment. First of all, I really like your enthusiasm. Thank you. But you were saying like, you find the stories and you kind of really rally around these certain properties, which at this point, we feel like are really valuable and that we want standing. And the stories can promote like engender kind of support for historic preservation. That said, I'm wondering, are those stories like, do you need to get the permission from the landowner then to like tell the stories, or is this the domain of the town because the town is commissioning the survey? So I'm thinking more like, you get a good story, right? And maybe we condense it and publish it as that newsletter comes out on a regular basis, like have a spotlight. Is that something, we'd need to get permission for from the actual property owner, or is this like the story's the domain of the town at this point, and that's something we can like communicate to people?
Yeah, that's a great question. the first part of my answer is that when I do the actual field work, I just want you to know, I don't enter anybody's property. All of the field documentation is done from the public rights of way, so streets and alleys, including taking photographs of the buildings and taking notes on the architecture. People do come out from time to time from their homes or buildings to question me about what it is that I'm doing. It is good for the town to notify the residents that this project is going on, so that at least most people will know, oh, that's that guy that's been hired to document the historic properties, because they see me walking around taking pictures. There are times I've been challenged. I got thrown off one ranch one time that I had permission to be on, and the lady decided to throw me off anyway. I have had people come out and really question me, like, like tell me to get away, basically, even though standing in the alleyway or in the street on the sidewalk made them nervous, and so I honored their wishes. But once I explain to people, I always end up in conversations with them about what it is that I'm doing. 98% of the time, they're just fine with it because they understand that I'm not the assessor's office, and this is not going to impact their property taxes or anything else negative to them. So I always explain that. Occasionally, I had somebody try to set a dog on me in the town of Lafayette when I was doing a survey there a few months ago. It was a big dog, and it would have really chewed me up. But anyway, so that's the first part of the answer. The other part, though, about the history is that the history of these properties doesn't belong to anybody. Historians write history all the time. They don't have to ask for permission from anybody to write a history of a family or of a property or whatever. We just do the research and write it up. If there are scandals involved in the family story, somebody might not be happy about that, but that becomes a little trickier. I don't know if you've ever seen on the Aspen Times newspaper what the masthead says, which is, if you don't want it published, don't let it happen. So that's been on the masthead, the front page of the Aspen newspaper, for over 100 years. And so there is a bit of that involved in writing history as well. But the final results of a survey project, it's very common. These become the property of the town. The town ends up owning these site forms, but they're also filed because of the grant here with the State Historical Society. They become public record. So once I finish my report and the site forms, they're available to anybody among the public. They are public documents. And so utilizing those stories to promote the history of the town is it's fair and open, just as any other history that gets written up is. But I do understand your concern and your question. It's a very good question.
Ron, it comes to mind that we have another family, long-term family here in town. And one of them wrote a book about what he considered the history of Minturn. It's a very casual written book. There have been some people who feel it should have addresses on every house, although those of us who've lived here long enough know exactly where they're talking about from his descriptions. And I have been fortunate enough to have been selling them for the last number of years because I had a store until I retired. And I give the money to the seniors group that's in town that has lunches and things. And I have some of those at home. So I will get one to Madison so you can have your own copy to browse through. I don't know how much that will help you, but it might.
Oh, yeah. That may be the book that Madison and I have already talked about.
The Minturn, a Memoir by Bill Burnett. Yes, that's the one that she's talking about. So
yeah. I absolutely need to get a copy of that for sure.
I have multiple, so I will get one to her and she can give it to you next time you two connect.
Okay.
Unless you'd like me to mail it to you.
I can just get it when I come in town. That's fine.
And the other thing is your little Aspen saying, and I don't know how many people in this room know this, but we have another current resident in this town that many years made a quote and they put it on a little bumper sticker, and it is Minturn. It is what it is and it ain't what it ain't.
Yeah, that's great.
And I have one of those stickers.
Hey, by the way, as a follow-up thought to your question, when you do utilize these materials and put them out to the public, you can always mention that this does not mean that these places are open to the public. You let folks know,
Right.
here's the history of this
I
house.
mean, people can't walk into somebody's house.
Right, but if you want to be clear about it, you just let folks know that here's the history of this house or this commercial building, but this does not mean that this is a publicly open property now. You can always state that. Most people get it though.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Ron, thank you very much. Are there any other comments, questions?
I don't have any.
Yeah, the one thing I'd say is I don't know how many times we'll get to. There's a few check-in points along the way, but
Mhm.
Madison and Ron, I love this idea of communicating with the town about the project. And so, Ron, just know that we'd love to hear your ideas along the way. Like, oh, this is a point at which you should probably give an update to the town or something like that. Give us some
Yeah.
guidance, from your experience with other towns, because I think that's something we definitely have talked about as a commission, is wanting to educate the town more. And this is a great opportunity.
You
So,
bet. I'm happy to do that. I also served for 5 years as chair of the Preservation Commission in Fort Collins.
okay,
And I also sat on the State Historic Preservation Board for 6 years. So I have experience with the governmental and regulatory side of historic preservation, as
okay,
well
great.
as the softer side of, working as a historian and working with nonprofits and all of that sort of thing. I also understand development issues. So
Great.
my career has allowed me to experience the whole gamut, the whole range of what goes on with historic preservation. So I'm happy to answer questions or engage in any discussion with you. And I will be checking in with you periodically throughout the project, in person and maybe even again on a Zoom call or whatever.
Great.
But I do plan to meet with you several times throughout this project. I want to be getting your feedback and I want to be able to provide you with updates on where things are. And then at the end of the project, I'm going to put together a PowerPoint presentation and actually come in person and give you a
Right.
presentation about what we discovered. Just so you know, I don't think it's in my scope, which I have open in front of me, but usually at the end of every project, I do a public presentation. It's not required, but I'm always happy to do that. So if you do want to schedule, I mean, your meetings, your hearings are public, but if you
Right.
want to schedule a special event in town, to invite the public to come learn about this project and all, I'd be happy to work with you to schedule something at the end of the project. We can do something more celebratory in nature also.
I wonder if that would be
Oh,
something that would be part of the actual town council meeting. I don't know.
I would think in efforts to uh, present to a wider audience, given that people do more people attend council meetings and also those are broadcast to
Right.
the TV. I would hope that we could have a joint meeting with council and HPC for Ron to give that presentation.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be,
that
would that be
good.
considered a work session though, rather than a public hearing?
No, we can have joint actual meetings. And if need be, or at least I believe we have had in the past. And if need be, we can certainly have a presentation ahead of time, and then have a council vote to adopt the survey during the actual bulk of the meeting.
Right. We could do it.
I love that. I love that idea. I love that idea.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ron. Really appreciate it.
Thank
And we
you
look forward
too.
to seeing you again and talking with you and learning more from you.
Are you guys meeting while I'll be there in January?
So you said we decided on the 13th, right?
13th, 14th, and that's a
Yeah,
Tuesday.
that's the week before their regular meeting. Their regular meeting is on the 21st that month.
Okay. Well, we'll get a good start on the field work the 13th, 14th. And if I have something already to present to you, I may in fact want to meet with you at your next meeting to talk about some more
Sure.
specific properties. So we can start formulating that list of 10 intensive level properties. I don't have to have that complete, the 10 by your meeting in January, but we want to start talking about what those 10 might be.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. We'd love to.
So maybe
You
we
just
should,
let us know.
did you say that's the 21st?
The 21st, yeah.
I'll put that in my schedule, and
Starts at 5:30.
yeah, maybe what we ought to do is if you guys could be thinking about it between now and then and come to that meeting with some thoughts on some really obvious buildings that you'd like to see surveyed. There may be some, I imagine there are some ones that you're already thinking of right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
probably.
So
Yeah.
I'd like to hear what those are. So I'll go ahead and put that in my schedule for the 21st, if that sounds okay.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much, Ron. We'll look forward to
Thank
seeing
you.
you very soon again.
Thank you as
Happy
well.
New
holidays.
year.
Thank you.
If you see
Yeah.
me, if you see me on the streets on the 13th, 14th, taking
We'll tell
pictures of
everybody you're
those-
not a property appraiser. You don't work for the county. You're a historic guy.
There you go. But do
A
stop.
good guy.
Do stop and say
I
hello.
won't sick my big dog on you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Ron.
Hey, Ron.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. And I think we might have Kelly Toon, according to my text. Kelly, are you there?
Oh, okay. Awesome. Great. I'm promoting you to a panelist, Kelly.
Kelly? Hello, Kelly.
I just finally got the unmute button.
Okay, no problem.
That's the hardest part. So
So-
don't worry, Kelly. You're in good shape now.
Yeah, and you have perfect timing. I know Kelly said he's trapped on a project up in Avon.
Yeah, I've been
we-
working 12-hour days every day for weeks, trying to get a restaurant open. So I apologize. I was busy at work and just lost track of time.
That's okay. Your timing's actually perfect. I don't know if you caught any of that discussion with Ron, but
Yes, I did.
yeah. So, but the part that we really need you for is this next part, because Lynn is, as we get into it, is going to recuse herself, and so we would lose our quorum. So your timing is perfect. So we really appreciate you joining,
Nice.
given your situation. So that concludes the special presentations. Now I'm on the agenda. I was reading the minutes on my phone, which is always dangerous while I was all discombobulated earlier. Sorry about that. Now we're on number 8, business items. And Madison, do you want to tee this up? And I guess Lynn, how do we deal with Lynn's situation? Does she get to sit here, or does something need to
No.
happen, Madison?
She will need to recuse herself and leave the room.
Okay.
There's lots of books you can read.
Yeah. There's a really good one by Bill Burnett.
There might be one on history of Minturn.
Okay, so before we start the business items, then Lynn, I guess you're going to recuse yourself.
I am going to recuse myself.
Okay,
Yes,
well, we
well,
will
no,
see you. Don't go far. We'll see you
I'm
in a
not.
few minutes.
I'm not.
Okay, great. And Kelly, I don't know if you saw that you were at the last meeting. I was not, but there was a draft presentation of the ordinance. There were comments, and then there's now a redraft. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at that. It's in the materials that Madison sent. It's Article 4 and Article 5 after all of the code section references in those tables. And that's what we're going to be discussing.
Yep.
Just to orient you. And Madison, perhaps you could open this up for us and tell us and set this up for discussion.
Of course. So as you'll notice, there's an ordinance in front of you that deals with 2 different chapters, Chapter 16 and Chapter 19. Much like I think the last ordinance that y'all processed, even though there are multiple chapters held within the same ordinance. Y'all are the body that's over chapter 19, whereas planning commission is the body over chapter 16. So while you can certainly give your thoughts on the table that deals with chapter 16, that's not really y'all's purview. Just like for planning commission, I'll be telling them, hey, y'all can give your thoughts on the stuff in chapter 19, but that's not really their purview either.
Right.
So in an ideal world, even though one affects the other, the both bodies will keep their comments separate to the chapters that they're actually over. So with that kind of background, section 19490 did not change from the discussion at the last meeting. That is essentially just the broadening, or actually not even really broadening, but just it's giving process to a section that we already have, which I'm very appreciative of. That was from Lynn's recommendation on her experience with the code in Buena Vista. So this is pretty much a copy and paste from Buena Vista's with some wording changed because they have I think a board of commissioners, whereas we have a town council, things like that. So that's pretty much just a removal of the redundant sentence and then an adding of Buena Vista's language. And then Article 5, Section 19550 would be a new section. This has changed since the last time y'all looked at this at the last meeting. So at the last meeting, the way the wording in regards to setbacks was proposed would be that people could encroach, in the example of the side setback, you could encroach 3 feet, but Robert at that meeting helpfully clarified that he thinks the 3 feet should actually be no closer than 3 feet to the property line. Same with front setback. You're not allowed to encroach 5 feet. You can get no closer than 5 feet to the setback or to the property line, and then rear setback same. And again, not allowing for any relief from the live stream setback. And then there's the allowance for a 5% increase for building coverage and impervious coverage, which is why actually that chapter 16, all of this 19550 does relate to chapter 16, as you'll see in subsection E and F. Directly references per chapter 16 zoning, and references the table that's within the ordinance, which is why we have those asterisks within the header of that table, telling people that there's a link to chapter 19, so that there's interlinking between the two. So it's a fairly short ordinance all in all, but the section 19550 is entirely new.
Right. But this was discussed at the last meeting, correct?
It was under discussion direction.
Yeah. Right. I mean, we've been going, I guess this is a third meeting we've been discussing it. And Robert has this is consistent with, it's always great to have the architects, have Kelly and Robert chiming in on these things, but Robert was good with the 3 feet, the 5 feet, the 5 feet.
Those are based off of his recommendations, and then the rest of the commission, a majority of the commission's thumbs up.
Okay, great. And then just for my own, since I wasn't at the last meeting, the 5%, was that discussed as well for the lot coverage and surface, the impervious and the lot coverage?
I do not recall it being discussed in depth. Most of the discussion, I believe, centered around the setbacks.
Okay. But was that proposed at the last meeting, the 5%, or is that new?
It was proposed at the last meeting.
Okay, so it just wasn't really discussed, if you will. Okay, great. I'm caught up. Kelly, Tracy, do you all have some comments, thoughts?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Go ahead, Kelly.
I'm learning how to do the Zoom on my phone.
Well, thanks for doing it. We really do appreciate it.
I just found the unmute button again.
Okay.
Uh, I don't know if anyone would ever be using this, but Robert seems to think it could be helpful in probably a very small percentage of something. So I personally don't see it as being used much, but if it's I'm all for any incentives we can give to anybody for nominating their building or having it be nominated. So and always struggling to find something else we can do to help people versus be a hindrance. So I'm all for it.
Okay. Tracy, do you have any comments?
No, not really. I mean, it looks pretty congruent with what we talked about. And also,
Yeah, I feel
full disclosure, it's not really my area of expertise. Like,
okay.
so I kind of defer to more you guys' expertise on things like setbacks and fire codes.
Yeah, well, so I'm not sure it's my expertise either, but what I would say is that I would say I agree with what Kelly said, and I agree with what Tracy said. It looks good. I don't find any issue with it. I hope it's helpful. It probably won't be helpful that often, but anything that we can do, I think, is a positive. And likewise, the 5% seems reasonable to me. And if it's that actually might be more helpful to folks than the setback stuff, but we'll see.
Well,
But I'm
if
good.
you're adding
I'm good with
to it, it might be, which this would
yeah,
come into play then.
yeah. That's what I'm thinking.
Like Robert
But
before, if you're the first one building, the next person has to stay further away from you for fire. And they probably want to do that anyways. If they're, when you're designing a place, you're always trying to typically stay away from your neighbor,
yeah,
typically, but it's challenging on small lots.
yeah. Um, so I guess it sounds like we're all looking favorably at this. And so there's no other nothing else to present on this, right, Madison? So we could open it up for a motion, right?
I do need public comment to be opened.
Oh, I'm sorry. My agenda again. Okay, let's open public comment. Thank you.
Okay, there is no one in the audience, so public comment can be closed.
Okay, let's close public comment. And then now I'll ask my question. There's nothing else, right? So
There's
we
nothing
can
else from
entertain
staff.
a motion to approve these two these changes. Really, I guess there's the asterisks in 16, and then but really we're approving. What are we actually approving? Are we approving? We can't really approve the changes to 16, right?
You will be approving. You will be forwarding a recommendation of approval to the town council for the ordinance itself.
Okay, for the whole order. Okay. So we could entertain a motion. Okay, I'll make a motion. Madison, you can help me characterize it, but we are a motion to approve the ordinance as presented for recommendation to town council to consider this and to, I guess, is it town council and planning and zoning, or?
You'll make a recommendation to council. Planning commission will also make a recommendation to council, and then council will consider both of those recommendations.
Okay, so we're making a recommendation as to the historical aspects of the ordinance, and we're making that recommendation to council. And so I'm making a motion to approve this ordinance as presented as a recommendation to council, subject to the recommendations of planning and zoning. Correct?
That's essentially correct, yes.
Okay. What'd you say, Kelly?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And you can help me with the wording on that. That was a little convoluted,
No worries.
Madison.
I got you.
Great.
I'm gonna
Okay,
go
thank
get Lynn
you.
real quick.
Okay, great. Thanks.
This book is sitting out there on the couch.
You can come in now.
It was published in 1905.
Welcome back, Lynn.
Hi,
Is that when the
Nellie.
book, that's in that book itself or the original?
Well,
Like,
that's
is
what
that,
I'm trying to figure out because it was sitting there on the couch by itself and it looked historical.
it does.
So I opened it up and it says Library of Congress Catalog Publication Data, 1905, but I can't find another copyright.
Hmm.
It's very interesting.
Okay, so we'll
I'm
reflect
back.
that Lynn has rejoined us. Welcome back, Lynn. We've just finished number 8 on the agenda. We're going to number 9, discussion direction items. Are there any discussion or direction items?
There are not.
Yep. Any direction items from commissioners or staff? Nope. Okay, staff reports. There's none of those today. Any historic preservation commission comments? Or we'll go on to future
Just
agenda
excited
items.
about Ron
Go ahead,
doing
Chris.
his work.
I
Actually, I'm
happy
excited.
to see the water tower lit up. I don't know.
Yes.
Awesome.
It was far too difficult to get that done, but we got it done.
I've only heard one negative comment.
Oh, well.
Well, there'll always be at least one.
Yeah, that's what I told Michelle.
But
Yeah.
was it about lighting it or the type of lighting?
The fact that it was lit.
The fact that it was lit. Wow, interesting.
There'll always be one.
Always
At
be
least.
one.
Any other commission comments?
No,
I
I'm
agree,
excited
by
to
the way. I don't
understand.
want to, yeah,
Ken, just
somebody
so you
said
know,
something.
Tracy
Mhm.
and I, we asked Madison, because it's just 2 of us, we're thinking about trying to get a hold of the lady who runs the Historical Society in Eagle and just going down and maybe taking her out to lunch and talking to her a little bit about things. If she has any further recommendations, she came and spoke once.
Yeah,
But, does she have any ideas?
that'd be great.
Well, what brought it to mind was, I don't know if you saw it last fall, but there was a speaker in Eagle at the library there that did a thing about the railroad coming to the mountains and how it got here. It was from the Colorado Railroad Museum in Denver came up and did it. And he did it in a special presentation to a gentleman who had donated a lot of stuff from Eagle. His father had collected in a barn or something. And it was really good. And, if we could start doing a few historical things to get people into not just making a building historical, but bringing the historic of the mountains and Minturn.
And
to
bringing the
us.
story to life. Yeah,
Yeah.
the history
It
to
was
life.
really good.
Yeah.
It was it was a small room, but it was full with people sitting on the floor, standing in the corners, on the chairs, and it took about 45 minutes. It was great. So I thought maybe we could find out from her how you do those kind of things. What's available to us and what kind of costs are behind it. Are you okay with
Mhm.
that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would definitely encourage that. That'd be terrific.
And also,
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's just I think that's great. I'm glad
also
y'all are
love-
going to do that.
To know like how she advertises and how she fills the room, because that's never easy with people's busy lives. So I want to pick her brain on that one.
And Tracy says she knows her a little bit, so that's why we decided.
Oh, good.
Maybe the
That's
2 of us
terrific.
go.
Yeah.
And we've been told what we cannot talk about, so we'll be very careful.
We'll behave, in other words.
Okay, good. All right. Any other comments today?
We were,
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. When are you coming back?
Christmas
I'll
Day.
be there on Christmas
That's
Day.
right, you said that.
Ho 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 ho! I'll be the sled coming through the mountains, I guess. It'll be my car
Let's
sliding.
hope not. Let's hope you say.
Yeah, the I-70 I was talking about, Madison, my daughter used to live in Denver, and so I was going back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
And now it's just Edwards, which is really nice.
Much easier.
Kelly, you may have missed that, but our daughter moved to Edwards, so it's
Oh,
pretty
wow.
exciting. Yeah. So. Okay, well then, any future agenda items?
Other than
I guess
Ron,
we just have
I do
the,
not have
we're going to
anything.
have Ron back, right?
Yes.
Have him back in January. That'll be terrific. And Kelly, did you hear that you need to come prepared to share all your top 10 or top 12 or whatever it is of your favorite buildings from a
Yeah.
historic perspective? We're
With
going to look
everyone
for
else,
you and Lynn
the
to
old-time
you and
character.
Lynn to really educate us,
Well, I'd love to walk around with him
and
possibly
Tracy.
on those days he's here, if that's
Yeah.
possible, if he wants. And, you know, also Lynn would be old man Lynn would be a great person to walk around with. You know, so much.
You know, that's a good idea, Madison. You might mention to him that there's a willingness for that if he would like to have some. He may want to just walk around, but if he does want to have some company, we can help arrange that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also
Okay.
today I'm working on for reopening Columbine Bakery in Avon. That's what I've been working on, and I got to Michelle, the original owner, today, and he's can barely walk around now, but he ran the bakery up in Gilman and has a bunch of stories. I did ask him if he had photos, and he's like, nobody took photos back then. It was so expensive. But we do have some of the old equipment that came from Gilman is still here, and we got it working. And but I still just keep thinking it'd be so great to record some of these people before they pass. It would be just so great to have their thoughts on camera. And we're talking about doing that with Michelle because he's got some old great stories about Gilman days, and it's just really important. And we just lost Ralph Myers last month or the other month, and I never got to record him. I just have what I remember him telling me. And it'd be really nice to kind of get a storybook thing together on video of people. Don't know how it could be done, but
When you guys are having that lunch, you might ask her if she's aware of how communities have done that. The only experience I had was when we had the old brewery. We went to one of the in San Antonio. We wanted to capture the history timers, and luckily we did because a lot of them have died since then. But we went to one of the museums there in San Antonio that was interested in and got them to do all the interviews and documentation. And so I don't know if there's something like that, like the Mine Museum or the Railroad Museum or somebody that might be interested in the history of Minturn and be interested enough to devote some resources to it. But that might be a direction.
You mean money, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we had to in part pay for the work the library did. I mean, the museum,
Mhm.
I don't know, there might be grants, just like we're going to do this survey. But that might be a place to look.
Gotcha.
Hey,
I
Lynn,
agree, it would be great.
does Lynn, her friend at the history, or is it Tracy's friend at the Eagle Historic Society, do they record elders in their memories at all? Have you ever asked?
I think it's a pretty standard practice in general in like historical thinking. So I would imagine that they do, just because, I mean,
Really,
recording stories is just
done
kind
it.
of a commonplace way to archive your history. So I'm thinking they do, but we'll find out.
It would be really
Yeah, they're
interesting to
gonna.
find out if
Yeah.
they have a program for that.
And I would think the only real thing you need is the permission of the person you're interviewing.
Yeah. It's amazing how quickly you can do the oral interviews because it's just tape recorder. It's just sit there and you ask
Just
questions. I
iPhone.
mean, I've sat in on a couple of a couple of days of sessions that we did with a bunch of the folks. But that's when the real work starts, is then you take the oral and you try to, but nowadays with technology and everything, it might be more streamlined. So it'll be interesting to see if you can talk to her and your friend and see what you can learn.
I think the most important part in that would be having the right questions developed beforehand, so you're not
Yeah.
floundering, but like, so that's an area that you can get like, oh, do you have a list of typical questions you ask? So yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Okay. Anything else tonight? Does that bring us, that brings us to the end of the agenda, unless there's anything else? We'll look for a motion to adjourn this evening.
I'd like to promote a idea of adjourning the meeting.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor?
I
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, well, we are adjourned. And thank you, Kelly, for joining in perfect time for us this evening.
I
And